In 2014, Google built a car with no steering wheel and no pedals. It drove real public roads. Then Waymo scrapped it. Why kill the car that proved full autonomy worked? Firefly was Google's first car built from the ground up, unveiled in 2014. Not a retrofitted sedan, a purpose-built statement that a self-driving car needed no human controls at all. It was the boldest bet ever made that steering wheels and pedals were obsolete. Its death is a case study in exactly where that bet broke. Start with the hard spec. Firefly capped out at 25 miles per hour. 2 seats. No steering wheel. No gas pedal, no brake pedal. Just a start button and a screen. Here's the clever part almost nobody notices. That 25 mile per hour cap was not a limitation the engineers regretted. It was the whole trick. In the United States, cars that stay under 25 miles per hour fall under a special federal category called low-speed vehicles. And low-speed vehicles are not required to carry conventional controls. So by staying slow, Firefly earned the legal right to have no steering wheel at all. Speed was the price of freedom from the dashboard. The design followed the same logic. Firefly was deliberately rounded, soft, almost cartoonish. A car built to look harmless. When you ask a stranger to climb into a machine that drives itself, you do not want it to look aggressive. You want it to look like a friendly appliance. Every curve was a trust signal. The look was engineered as carefully as the sensors, because a car nobody trusts is a car nobody rides. That covers the what. Now the why it matters. Here's where it stops being a concept. Starting around 2015, Firefly did not just circle a test track. It drove real public roads in Mountain View, California, and later in Austin, Texas. Real streets, real traffic, real riders in the seats. And this is the part that made it historic. There was no human fallback inside the car. No safety driver poised to grab a wheel, because there was no wheel to grab. If the software got confused, a person could not reach over and take control. The only oversight came from remote monitoring and the code itself. Think about what that asks of a passenger. You sit down, the doors close, the car pulls into traffic, and there is physically nothing you can do to steer it. Firefly proved something that sounds obvious now but was radical then. That ordinary people would actually get in and ride. It was not a museum model or a lab prop rolled out for a photo. It carried humans on public roads in a form they could not drive. That was the proof of concept the whole industry was waiting for. The technology could do it. Passengers would allow it. So why retire the one car that showed it worked? Now the turns. In June 2017, Waymo retired Firefly. The car that proved the point was quietly parked. In its place came fleets of modified Chrysler Pacifica minivans, and later Jaguar I-Pace SUVs. Ordinary cars retrofitted. So why swap a bold custom pod for boring minivans? The stated reason was blunt. To run an actual service, Waymo needed higher speeds, more driving range, and vehicles it could get in large numbers. Firefly was hand-built and slow. You cannot easily mass-produce a custom pod, and you certainly cannot run a business on a car that tops out at 25 miles per hour. And here's the trap the design walked into. Remember, the slow speed was the very thing that let Firefly drop its controls. But that same 25 mile per hour ceiling meant it could never touch a highway. It could never keep pace with normal traffic. The exact choice that freed it from the steering wheel is what boxed it out of real-world roads. Firefly was legal precisely because it was too slow to be useful. A minivan, by contrast, drives 65 on the freeway and rolls off an assembly line by the thousand. For a company that wanted to move real riders across a real city, that was not a step backward. It was the only way forward. So what did the missing controls actually teach us? This is the real lesson of Firefly. When Waymo went back to normal cars, those Pacificas and Jaguars kept their steering wheels and their pedals. On purpose. Not because the engineers loved dashboards, but because full autonomy still needed a fallback path. For safety and for the regulators watching. Deleting the controls was a wager. It said the technology is ready to be trusted completely, alone, with nothing for a human to grab. Retreating to cars with a wheel and pedals still bolted in was a quiet admission. Not yet. The industry blinked. Look at what each car was really for. Firefly stripped the controls to make a statement. That the future had arrived and humans were optional. The production robotaxis kept the controls to actually operate day after day, and to satisfy the agencies that decide what is allowed on public streets. One was a manifesto on wheels. The other was a working business. The pod removed the wheel to prove a point about what autonomy could be. The minivans kept the wheel to survive contact with reality. And reality, it turned out, was not ready to hand over every control just yet. Here's the decision that changed everything. Firefly did not die because it couldn't drive itself. It drove itself just fine. It died because the compromises that let it lose the controls. The 25 mile per hour cap, no highway, the hand-built body, made it useless for a real service. And that is the whole truth about the limits of full autonomy. The hard part was never the driving. The driving worked. The hard part was scaling to a fleet, going fast enough to matter, satisfying regulators, and building cars by the thousand. Keeping the steering wheel wasn't cowardice. It was the pragmatic path to actually putting robotaxis on the street. Firefly bet that removing the wheel proved autonomy had arrived. The real proof turned out to be a boring minivan that could do the job every single day. Today, Firefly sits behind glass in the Computer History Museum and the London Design Museum. Not a failure, a monument to a bet that was too early. Not wrong. The steering wheel-free pod was a preview, not a product. And its quiet death mapped the real limits of full autonomy. Not the driving, but the speed, the scale, and the rules. Want to see how the robotaxis that replaced it actually navigate a city? That story is next.